So you go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can everyone? Okay. Good morning. My name is Sahaye Hailomaram. I'm a researcher and a current project leader of safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in Coromandus Alumni Association. So let me say a little bit about Coromandus Alumni Association. CAA is an international non-profit association constituted of members of researchers active in the field of dance anthropology, ethnochronology, dance studies, and intangible cultural heritage that operates on an international level. Senior members of CAA are well-known researchers in the field of dance anthropology, ethnochronology, intangible cultural heritage, and has been affiliated with UNESCO's various projects. For instance, by establishing Coromandus, the first and only international Erasmus Master in dance knowledge, practice, and heritage. Coromandus investigates dance and other movement systems, ritual practices, martial arts, and game physical theater as intangible cultural heritage within the broader context of ethnochronology, the anthropology of dance, dance studies, and heritage studies. As you can see, the current presentation it's titled The Challenges of Safeguarding the Safeguarded Heritage. You can put it in quote-unquote, the safeguarded heritage, political, economic, and ownership issues in the negotiation for the digitization of Ethiopian Ice Age film materials archived in Hungary, Budapest. Let me say a little bit about the film materials. We have documents, a 1964 diplomatic letter exchanged between Hungary and Ethiopia half a century ago states that these film materials were recorded following Emperor Haile Selassie, who was a former emperor of Ethiopia, visit to Hungary for a state visit, 3-day state visit. You can see here his visit, pictures. This is in Budapest half a century ago. These are the pictures. We have this letter says, the emperor and his retinue fell in love with a dance performance they watched during their stay in Budapest. The then emperor asked if Hungarian researchers could conduct a scientific dance and music research in Ethiopia, in his country. Then the Hungarian leaders responded to his definite interest by saying that we can send music and dance researchers to Ethiopia. So this is a two cross-cultural or intercultural dialogue as a result of intercultural dialogue that comes. So I think for some of you, these people are familiar. These were the researchers who were sent to Ethiopia half a century ago. The first one is a European renowned ethnochronologist known as Martin George. The second one is ethnomusicologist Balint Sharoshi. And the other one is a freethinker and dance specialist Tibor Vadashi. The first one, the entire crew was organized by the well-known composer Koday Zoltan. He's an internationally renowned composer as well. So what did they do half a century ago? They recorded 3,000-meter film, which is 45 to 50 hours film, 100,500 photographs, 1,500 photographs, and 10 hours of sound recording, which among these are classical film of Ice Age, such as Ashenda, Meskel, Tumkat Ififani, Erecha, Fichet and Balala, which some of them are actually in the Ice Age list. They are already recognized. So these film materials, you can see the map. It includes also the former, they were Eritrea and Ethiopia half a century ago. They were together. So this shows, the map shows the route where these researchers have been. So the film materials are collected from a total of 8 Ethiopian provinces: Showa, Wolot, Tigray, Begemidr. Some of the names are from earlier. So 17, I shall not name them because I have a little time for them. But you can see, so from 17, including from 17 settlements. These materials are archived in Budapest, Hungary. So they are, some of them are systematically organized as such, as you can see in the picture. So, and the others are highly vulnerable. So they are archived within a house of the researchers, actually. So this is the picture, for example, I have been given by the daughter of one of the researchers in Budapest during my research, 6 months research. So as recent as 2014, there was a negotiation between Ethiopia and Hungary to digitize these materials. As such, one of Ethiopia's researchers was invited to Hungary to look at these film materials. And he convinced it to the Hungarian authorities that he would convince the Ethiopian authorities when he came back from Hungary and raise awareness about the vitality of these materials. But according to another researcher who is representative of Hungary, the negotiation is discontinued due to unknown reasons. So in 2015, senior Koromondos alumni associations, which one of them is a great, Egil Baka here, through the close consultation, I was given the opportunity to do a research in Hungary as part of an international master's degree. So I do my research here in Ethiopia and in Hungary for about 6 months shared. And the problems that we find out there are 3 key problems. One is political, and the other is economic, and the third one is ownership issue. So what we have is, according to my interlocutor, who I interviewed here, the Ethiopian researcher, he says Ethiopian cultural policy is not as strong as it should be when it comes to dance and music. This is due to the perceived notion of these materials are actually only about music and dance. In fact, the researchers recorded an entire heritage of a nation. So they saw the vitality of these materials before even we thought to consider about Ice Age in a broader sense. So the economic problem we have, recent economic problem within Hungary, I said within Ethiopia, the problem of politics, cultural policy problem. In Hungary, due to shortage of financial resources, the Hungarians want Ethiopia to pay for the digitization of the materials, the film materials. But these, again, because they consider it is archived in Hungary, and they consider this is part of Hungarian issue. This is owned by Hungarian. But in fact, the research shows that the negotiation, however, doesn't consider the fact that the film materials were documented through the labor and financial contribution of many various governmental and non-governmental organizations, which among them are actually UNESCO itself was involved in the project. There were 15, and the other is IFMC, which is today International Folk Music Council, today is known as ICTM. So this is a heritage of not only one nation. It is recorded in Ethiopia, but the project is a project of an entire, you could call it a generation, the 1960s generation. This and other diplomatic letter states that Hungary spent 775,000 DFT, Hungarian forint, and borrowed and equipped an equipment worth of 586,000 Hungarian forint. In addition to this, approximately from 150 to 175,000 DFT was covered by Ethiopia. Now, part of this, for example, the equipment, there was an equipment given to Ethiopia for the first time, owned by UNESCO and tested here in Ethiopia during the research. So now the practical challenge we have as an association is that these films are difficult to access because they are heavily guarded by the archivists due to the perceived notion, also practical problem. They say these films are recorded using 16 millimeter film. So if we play them over and over again, so they will lose their quality. So we need to be able to wait until they get digitized. So we tried, for example, I and some members of Koromondos Alumni Association, we tried to locate our resources externally and try to digitize these materials. But I have talked to one of Paul, he's a researcher within the institution, and he says, even if we allocate the resources by ourselves, we cannot do it as an energy organization. So the reason is because this raises awareness, shall we put it this way. The clause, it gives an urgent need for close cooperation between NGOs, the representative, we, and the state parties, Hungary and Ethiopia. Because we believe if these films are digitized, the materials can be used both as a background for promoting Ice Age values, research the in turn becomes part of the curriculum for students, creativity that in turn leads to creative industries and creative economy, which are fundamental pillars of sustainable development. We have two primary examples. In Norway, there is a folk music and folk dance archive in Trondheim, Norway, which is gives a significant also service as an input to international students who are partly Coromondos and other students who want to investigate. And there is similarly at the Institute of Musicology in Budapest, which serves. So these are our aims, and I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions.
The challenges have many dimensions indeed, so please ask your questions.
Oh, please.
Hello. Yes, it's very interesting. So they were doing this filming, and the people, of course, is from Ethiopia who are in the films. Why hasn't the government demanded some kind of, image-related property? Because the people who's in the film actually own their own image, That's something very interesting. You can also take it through the families and, make all the families and the people related to them, they can all write a letter demanding the government that they pay the royalties for using their material. And since they don't want to pay the royalties because this will happen, then they can agree to make the digitalization of the products. We have the same problem in Mexico with Chicago University. They conducted a very interesting work on registering the indigenous language from Mayan and South Mexico states. And this is from the 1900s, and it's very valuable, but it's rotting because, we're in the same spot, so.
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the aim of this presentation is actually to raise such kind of questions. And what I want you to remember is also these Hungarians, they came to Ethiopia, but they didn't do it alone. There was also Ethiopian researchers within Ethiopia, so they cooperated. The issue is the researchers at that time, they gave a copy of these materials to the Ethiopian authorities. But between 1965, early actually, 1974, there was a revolution. There was a regime change in Ethiopia, so a communist government came. And the issue are the materials who were kept in Ethiopia are said to be burned, either lost. So now the original copy is in Hungary. That's why. But there is this is due to the lack of awareness that none of these actually nations, even the people who are guarding the archive materials, they don't know what is within the material. This is the huge problem. And the Ethiopians doesn't know how much heritage is kept in Hungary. So I was lucky enough actually to come to this across as a kind of make it my master's dissertation topic. So this was, you could say it as, for me, it's also part of my own heritage. But it becomes, in one way, the issue of now, we talk about Ice Age. Actually, if you see historically back, there are some actually evidences that we began to talk much earlier about the value of Ice Age. So not recently, that's what I want to say. So this is part of the project that to raise awareness. I came here to raise basically awareness among these two nations. Thank you very much for your question.
You have another question?
If there already was an agreement to share the material, but unluckily the Ethiopian copy was now damaged, why couldn't they give you a new copy? Because nothing have changed in the agreement, has it?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry, Mari.
When this was recorded, you said a copy was given to Ethiopia from
Yes.
Hungary,
Yes.
and the copy got lost. But
Yes.
you haven't changed anything of the agreement, so why can't you have another copy? Or is this an issue, or is it only about the funding?
I think this is also another interesting question. But they want it. This is only due to kind of where is the place. You can put where is the place, where are the films. They are archived in Hungary. So we kept to them. There is the issue of we kept to them for 15 years. So it costs us money to put them with an archive. So there is an additional kind of, so we have kept it this way. And initially, actually, it was compared to Ethiopia's costs, Hungary spent, because we have nearly 300 diplomatic documents exchanged between these two countries. So they say it was part of a state given to Ethiopia, so a state gift from Hungary to Ethiopia. So there is this issue, another external issue. But the problem I have is the Hungarians are not ready to open up space. Yeah. Okay. Please.
Yeah, I'm Egil Bocka from Norway, and I've followed the process a bit at the side, and it's really a very specific situation or specific material that we have a material so far back as in the 60s of top qualified researchers documenting such an enormous amount of intangible cultural heritage in such an interesting place as Ethiopia. So first of all, this is an extremely rare and valuable documentation, even if you don't know exactly what is on it. Secondly, I'm wondering, I mean, there are several kinds of strings to this material. One string is the researchers and their willingness to share somehow their work. And it doesn't seem to me that this is the main issue. Then you have the countries wish to, or the institutions and countries problem with finances and looking upon this material as resources, the Hungarians, I suppose, would like to benefit from their work keeping this. And then finally there is negotiation between the countries about what kind of, where should they take their resources and how should this exchange be happening and who should pay for it. For me it seems clear that the way of solving this would be that you got a grant or a funding from outside, external funding, to do this, so that neither Ethiopia nor Hungary would be the main payers of the costs. And then I suppose it would be easier to agree on the exchanging, because I think this is extremely important and it's a big principle. And in many cases we have the researchers who are, according to their research traditions, owners of the material and forget about giving it back. This is changing very heavily, and I think in this case it's not about that, but it's about how to deal with the benefits that both Hungarians and Ethiopians would like to take from the material. Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestions, and it was indeed a very interesting presentation highlighting one of the key challenges in access to the ICH documentation. Now, we have been talking of dance and we have been talking of documentation. Another very endangered ICH element is the traditional knowledge on building crafts. And we have here Meskerim Asikwed, who is going to talk about contemporary vernacular architecture and art. So over to Meskerim.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much for giving me this incredible opportunity to speak in front of you about vernacular architecture and art. I am the co-founder of Zoma Contemporary Art Center, and I have been working on vernacular architecture, Ethiopian traditional culture, dying traditions, and how to conserve them for many, many years. So I'm going to show you photographs I took about 20 years ago and ongoing, and also these indigenous rituals and cultural practices that I think need to be revitalized and be understood, documented, because it is really, they reflect on the future. So I'm going to talk to you through images. I'm also an anthropologist, so there are a number of reasons why I have taken an interest in this specific subject. What is culture? So these are the topics I want to touch. How does culture relate to us? And why should culture be preserved? So I will go through this step by step and just on the three topics on culture. So what is culture? You know, through my practice, because I've studied a lot of cultural practices or rituals and religious practices in Ethiopia, and my thesis was specifically on Irrecha. This is an annual celebration that takes place in Debre ዘይት. And while I was doing that, I also found a number of other rituals that are being practiced throughout Ethiopia that have not been documented or barely documented. So it's a defense mechanism. That's what culture is. Culture is where a group of people try to find solution for some kind of calamity, when there is some kind of danger or when there is some kind of a major problem. This is one of their ways of cope mechanism. So they create a culture that brings them together. And it has a do's and don'ts. These cultural practices have, you know, you can do this, you cannot do this. So it sets apart certain group of people and creates an extended family, whether they are related or not. That's part of what this culture comes about. And also, it changes also, and it also adapts. It changes the way it's being practiced, and it adapts to the situations that are current. For instance, if there are education, if for instance in a village a road is coming in, it brings in a different kind of group with it, or group of people in it, and therefore these cultural practices start to adapt and change, or the different religions also make it happen that way. And how does culture relate to us? Is the third issue that we're going to do. So that's identity. It creates an identity. It actually creates, we have a tendency to find out that we're different and we have something special about what we do. So that's one of the things. And then also belonging. It creates some kind of family, or you belong to something and you like to pride yourself because you belong to that. Or it also brings confidence. So this is some ways in how it relates to us. Why should culture be preserved? Because it's educational. It's about our future. It's understanding the past, and also we learn so much from it because it's lasted for so long. And why was it created and how? And also it is also another very key thing is the environment. It also responds to the environment. These cultures are created, or these rituals or whatever culture is created because there's this sense of let's preserve the environment. When people worship the tree, they're talking about preserving the trees. When people worship the water, they're talking about worshiping, preserving the water. Therefore, they're talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide. None of us can live one, without the other. We have to we intake oxygen and we give carbon dioxide to the tree. Therefore, we have to coexist. That is actually an environmental issue, and that's one of the reasons why culture has to be understood and preserved. And it's about the future. It tells us what we need to do, where we need to go, what it was, and what mistakes have been done, and how could we move forward. So with that, I'm just going to give you a little background, because I'm going to jump into the architecture back and forth. I'm going to talk to you both the cultural practices and also how architecture comes in. This is in 1997. I traveled throughout Ethiopia. It's almost 20 years ago. And started documenting constructions. And these buildings in particular are stone buildings in northern Ethiopia. But I have lots of photographs from all over the country. And these photographs, I wasn't just looking at the aesthetics of these buildings. I was looking at the construction techniques. And part of the things that interested me the most was how long they lasted, the hundreds of years they have been standing there. So why did they stand? What is the secret? Why did we abandon them? What's the secret behind them? And a lot of these cultural practices also take place in these places, because I'm talking about a dying culture that absolutely needs to be preserved. So going back to what's culture, the defense mechanism, the do's and don'ts, and the changes and adaptations. I'm going to take you now to one of the practices that my grandmother, actually both my grandmothers and my great-grandmother used to practice. It's called atete. It's a kind of a taboo ritual, because these people also are follow the Orthodox religion, but at the same time they also practice this atete. Atete is where they do, as you can see them, they sing, and they also take a lot of, I'll go through a few pictures of what it does. And again, cultural practices are dying. So I had to go, because I was not allowed to really understand what my grandmothers were doing, I had to come back and study it, academically. And so I had to find people who actually, to this day, practice it. And so one of the things they use is like the coffee beans. It's a very maternal ritual. They talk about during the ceremonies that they're collecting the beads that are, the coffee beans with the cover on it. They put it in butter, they boil it, and then the butter is spread. And they're all symbolically very strong. Butter comes from the cow, and it's the food, the medicinal purpose, and everything around it. So it's about, they're talking about peace, fertility, security, symbolisms. All these things apply in these rituals. And here you have the oats, the butter, and then the honey there. So this health, medicine, medicinal plants, medicinal food, and all this are incorporated within this ritual. So those are the things I was looking at as I was studying them. And then here, the beads are also a very important, significant part of these rituals. So these are the elders the butter being put on their body, and also the beads being used as symbol of water and the sky. And I just don't want to get in the details of it, and I welcome you to read my writings on these things, because it takes a long time to talk the details. I just want to give you a glimpse of what's happening in these rituals. And here the children, passing it on to the children. So here the children butter is being put on their forehead, they're being given the coffee bean to taste, and the whole family come together. It's not really a ritual that actually excludes the men or the children, although it is a very female-oriented ritual. And then the future is here. Here's one of the girls in the family who's going to school and studying, and now she's actually an educator. This picture was taken 10 years ago. And but the ritual is going on, the music is going on, and everything is happening. She's also doing her school academic work, which shows you that also a ritual that actually is very futuristic, it's tolerant, and also there's a lot of love. How does culture relate to us? Identity, belonging, and confidence that we talked about. So here's Recha. You probably know about Recha with the recent news and the uprising and all that, but I actually did my, my research specifically on this ritual. Again, where the female are taking on this ritual practices, you know, but it's still going on. Again, I will give you the names of my writings so you can read about it. And Gadda is here. Here is another one, which is a practice that happens once every 8 years. But it's all, again, about coming together, rules and regulations, and forgiveness, punishments, and also very peaceful punishments, by the way. and a number of things happen. So every 8 years, a new leader is appointed. And leaders are trained from childhood to elder. So I suggest that you read about a book on Gadda by Asmarom Lagasa. I think he's the one who wrote it very, very thoroughly. So when I'm working around these rituals, I'm also finding out that it's not just the buildings, but the aesthetics of the buildings are very important to many of these constructions. Again, these are earth buildings or straw buildings or whatever. In the gardening that I decided to add, because this was in a refugee camp that I took by Sudanese refugees or the in Binishango. And then the rest of them in Oromia region in the middle, and then also in the Gurage region on the end photo. And then this is another ritual. It's called Boja, where they celebrate the thunder. And it's in the Gurage region. And it's still being practiced. Again, it's dying because the young people are no longer interested in them. So with this, I just want to take you, why should culture be preserved? Education, environment, and future is what we talked about earlier. So as I'm traveling around, I just want to take you to the very high end of the construction techniques that we need to also preserve, which is all intertwined with these cultural practices as well. And you can actually find a lot of these stories within the cultural practices. This is Yeha in northern Ethiopia. And this is one of the most amazing constructions I have ever seen. I often wonder how a 3-meter wide stone carved out very sharply was 1 meter height, can go up and about, I would say, a meter long. How that kind of stone can be lifted up 12 meters up high, what tools did they use, and how did it happen, and what kind of tools did they use to even carve it, and how did they lock it one stone into another to keep it, so it stands for 5, 6, 7,000 years, because we don't even know how long this has been standing. And so given all this, here we come to the contemporary architecture. We've decided to build an art center using this technique, not faking it, not taking just a facade, but actually learning the technical know-how. And also doing a very fine finishing in constructing this. So Zoma Contemporary Art Center, which I direct and founded, is built with that technique. And also on the Bali Mountain, we're currently building another earth building, again using this technique called cob, where we don't use so much wood. But again, this kind of techniques cannot just be overlooked. They require a tremendous amount of research, not only the buildings, but also the stories with them, the rituals and everything that actually leads into these constructions. Because, you know, one of the things that people do to preserve their culture is, because it's not written in a book form or that, it's in a story form. So when you sit down and listen to these incredible stories, you learn about the techniques, you learn about the reasons why these constructions were being used. So with this, I will end my my presentation, and this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krum. It was really very enlightening, and we really learned a lot from your presentation. May I ask you, now all these building traditions, they are very old. So when you're saying researching, Where are you researching? Because they were not documented. They were all oral traditions. So can you just share a bit about that?
Sure. Is that it? Hello? Okay. One way to research is really by being there and by taking samples. For instance, sometimes when I look at a stone building, I take sample from the building and look at what material is inside it. More often I find that they have lime inside it, a little bit of sand, or even the local soil, how they use the local material to make, it's the mixture, how much sand, how much lime or how much water they put in it or how much grass they put in it. All these things are in the buildings themselves and they can be physically studied. But in addition to that, there are also people who have actually taken a huge interest and have done a number of research on this and have written so much about vernacular architecture. So a combination of both is what it is.
Any questions from the floor?
Yes, I have a question about the research. So once you do the research, I see you interview some people, specific people who has this traditional knowledge of building. But what you're doing is you're getting this knowledge and then you're building something new, which I encourage and I really applaud. I think it's a great work. But at the same time, I have a deep worry about what will happen with the cultural property, the intellectual property of that knowledge. Once you register and you put it out there, how can you ensure that these cultural assets will be still belonging to the people that share it with you in the first place?
That's a very good question. Intellectual property is really a key issue on this subject. I think that is we need to explore on how to protect the intellectual property. But this is knowledge that was there for thousands of years. And so what I do is I collected not just from one person, from a number of people. And they have, it's come down from generation to generation to generation. My role in this is when I write about it, I talk about where I got this information from. I don't pretend that I got it myself. And by doing that, at least it allows other researchers to even go farther with this kind of studies. And there's more to do, and I want more people to work with me, specifically on this. And by also practicing it, by doing it, you learn even more, because you actually are experimenting with it at the same time. But trying to stay as loyal as possible to the original structure, and also adapting to new construction, because so it could be livable for modern people. This way, you actually continue the process, but at the same time, you also adapt something new into it, so it can go on and living forever. I mean, if I show you I have thousands of photographs from all around the world on this specific architecture. It's just that I'm not here to talk just about that, so I don't have time. But yes, intellectual property, my only contribution to that is by naming every place where I got this information from.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to know two things. One is that how much the percentage of the villagers like housing, like a structure, houses, in using that kind of vernacular, the techniques when the villagers built their own house, and then is it still, they're working on that? And the second question is that is there any like a governmental level effort to assist that, to that like a vernacular art technology, or to continue to the building the villagers, houses? Yeah.
I just need to get the first question. What was it? I understood the second question.
First question. And I
First
mean,
question, I understand. So the second question is about support of government. But the first question.
Yeah.
What was the first question? Is the key point?
First question, the key point is are there many practices in the village level or when they build a house in the local level, using their own traditional?
It's echoing. Do you understand the question?
When they
your voice is echoing. I'm sorry. It's not that you're not clear. It's just there's an echo. So the first question is: are there are these buildings, are these construction techniques being still made? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yes. What we do is we combine different things, and for instance. The floor technique may be something else. There's different floor making techniques, and that maybe you learn it from one area, and you learn the roof making technique from another area, the doors or or even the wall itself, or even the finishing part of the wall. There's so many. So you combine. So what I do is actually combine these different techniques from different parts, whichever one works the best. And that's what it has been, even in the ancient days. You can actually see certain things that have been adapted from different areas, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing. So yes, some of these buildings are still being practiced. Some of them are not. However, the government support on this, I have a feeling there is some government support, because I keep hearing about certain, like there's a lot of environmental motion that's within the government, and there's an interest in that. But I'm not sure to what level, because we're really completely doing this on our own. And we haven't gotten any support from the government, nor did we ask for it. But I have to explore that and find out what kind of support there is from the government. So at this point, I don't know.
I think Susani has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question about what you said about the Atite ritual, because you were saying it's a taboo ritual that your grandmother still practiced, and then, but you could not really know about it, and then you said you had to do research in order to learn about it. Could you explain that a little bit? So was there a rupture in the transmission in your mother's generation, or what happened?
Sure. When my grandmothers were practicing this, my parents actually were born after the Italian invasion. And the whole country's attitude was not about going to the past, but really how to defeat Italy and how to educate the young people and give them the best education there is, which is very much Eurocentric kind of education, even though there was a lot of effort to also conserve some of the traditional schooling. In that process, my parents went to school to a certain extent, and then by the time I was born, the whole effort was giving me the best education there is. And so this ritual, because I was very young, when my grandmother died, I think when she eventually died, I was about 10, but I didn't even know my maternal grandmother was doing it until after she died. But I remember my great-grandmother doing it. So this is a taboo, and there's also a tremendous amount of effort by missionaries to completely dismiss this. Interesting enough, during my research, I found out that the Orthodox Church actually kind of coexists with it, but there wasn't a major effort to destroy it. So when my grandmothers died, all the beads were given either to people who practice it or to the church. So I didn't even have any kind of the symbolic items with me. So it died with them. So I had to start from scratch. So I had to find people who actually practice this in order to understand it. So it was a curiosity. What is this? It's a search for identity. Yeah.
Thank you for presentation. In India, we call Vastu, that is traditional architectural science. So is similar kind of traditional knowledge or a belief system for architecture you follow here?
There's an echo again.
Is there any traditional knowledge system on architecture?
There is traditional knowledge system in vernacular architecture. Not a lot. I always have a hard time. I have to look for other people outside of Ethiopia to collect this, to read about this kind of things, because there is actually an interest, worldwide interest. There's some in Germany where rubbed earth in particular is being well researched and being written about, or even the cob in the US, they write a lot about it. So there are people who are interested. When you're researching, you always dig around and you find things that people have done. And there's also an Egyptian architect who has done a beautiful work on domes. There are a number of, I have a lot of books on this, so there are a lot of people who have written on this. But here in Ethiopia, do we have a specific focus on this? Not yet, but it needs to happen. Yeah, it needs to happen all over the world.
We have missed two of our speakers, and their presentations were on cultural tourism and also, about conflicts between the various communities. As we promote Ice Age values, there is also this issue of cultural diversity. So my question to all three of you, if you can reflect, what is happening right now in African countries for using these great cultural assets you have for socioeconomic empowerment of these communities? Is commercialization a challenge? What is your reflection and thoughts on this? I'd like to hear from each of you, since we have some time.
Thank you. My feeling is that there is, for example, the issue in terms of implementing Ice Age, especially the convention. There is a strong institutional support here in Ethiopia. But in terms of research, in terms of raising awareness about Ice Age, in general, also about other traditions within Ethiopia, I think there is, I tried, for example, for my research to find out if there are any scholarly materials written on it. There is almost none. So this is my first-hand experience.
I think regardless of what the outcome is, more and more research has to be done. Yeah, there is, when cultural tourism can have some issues, what can it do to these practices and all that. But really, it's a reality we have to live in. How do we make it work, and how do we get the best out of it is the issue. And the other is, I think we really, any material on this, written material, I don't understand why we are afraid to write about them. But the written material is so rare to find, especially written by the people who practice it, or even close to it. So that needs to, yeah.
I'll come back to you.
I will say that the whole ICH organization is not really known a lot outside, in other African countries. I'll take Nigeria, for example, where I just relocated from the United States to Nigeria, and there's almost like little or no knowledge. I have knowledge of it because I am the executive board member and representative to UNESCO, and so through ICTM, I'm able to know that so I think if the committee can look for other ways of promoting itself, so that scholars who study, some of these intangible cultures will be able to gain access to these committee and be able to use the available materials.
Bonjour, c'est Mohamed de Mauritanie. Donc par rapport à cette question qui a été posée en ce qui concerne l'impact du tourisme sur les PCI, par rapport aux pays africains, je pense que la question principale pour les communautés africaines, c'est la connaissance de la Convention. Elle reste encore un outil qui est utilisé uniquement au niveau des connaisseurs. Et comme vous le savez, la Convention est vivante seulement par les pratiquants, par les communautés. Donc je crois que l'effort important à fournir, en premier lieu, c'est un effort de sensibilisation et de transmission de la Convention au niveau des communautés. Les communautés qui détiennent des PCI. Tant qu'elles ne connaissent pas dans un langage qui leur est propre, qu'ils peuvent assimiler facilement, ça restera toujours une affaire d'administration, une affaire d'État, une affaire d'intellectuels, une affaire d'universitaires. Ce n'est pas pour minimiser l'importance de ça, mais c'est pour mettre l'accent que l'effort important à fournir est un effort de mobilisation des détenteurs eux-mêmes de la communauté, des communautés. Tant qu'elles ne sont pas au courant de la Convention, tant qu'elles ne maîtrisent pas tous les aspects de la Convention, les efforts seront des efforts qui n'aboutiront pas, à mon sens. En ce qui concerne l'impact du tourisme, la remarque que j'ai par rapport à beaucoup de communautés, c'est qu'il y a certaines valeurs que les gens ne veulent pas mettre à la disposition des touristes. Ceci est propre à leur culture. Et ils ont de grandes craintes par rapport à leur savoir, à leur propriété intellectuelle ou à leur connaissance, qui risquent d'être détruites ou qui risquent d'être dénaturalisées ou déconceptualisées par des manifestations organisées uniquement à des fins touristiques. Ce qui est souhaitable, c'est qu'on revienne à un état de la nature, à un état où les pratiques se font de façon inopinée,